For decades, we've thought about financial security as just building bigger walls. But what happens when the enemy isn't at the gate, but is already inside? Today, we're cracking open a new blueprint for a smarter fortress, one that's designed not just to keep threats out, but to hunt them down from within. For the longest time, cybersecurity in the financial world was pretty much a game of compliance. The whole point was simple. Just check the right boxes on a form so you don't get hit with a fine. But this new playbook, it flips the whole script. It says security isn't just a cost you have to pay, it's something that actually creates value. The focus is shifting from just following the rules to getting real, measurable results that protect the business. To really get why this change is so massive, let's use an analogy. Think about the old way of doing security. It was a lot like building a medieval castle, right? You'd build the highest walls you could, dig the deepest moat, and figure that perimeter would keep all the bad guys out. But see, here's the catch. Today's cyber threats aren't some barbarian horde trying to smash down your front gate. They're way more subtle. They're like spies and assassins. They use things like phishing emails or compromised software to sneak inside the walls. And once they're in, that whole fortress design is pretty much useless. Okay, so if the old castle model is broken, what's the fix? Well, we have to build a smart fortress, one that has defenses not just on the outside, but woven into its very architecture. And the design for that new fortress? It's all laid out in something called the Financial Cybersecurity Resilience Development Blueprint. So here's our game plan for breaking down the design of this new fortress. We've already talked about that big shift from compliance to results. Next up, we'll dive into the four-pillar framework that's its foundation. Then we'll see how to build strength from the inside, defend the whole ecosystem, and finally, hit that ultimate goal, resilience. At the very heart of this new strategy is the four-pillar framework. Now, don't think of this as just some static checklist. It's more like a dynamic blueprint for building a security culture that's constantly learning, adapting, and improving itself. And these are the four foundational pillars of our smart fortress. First up, you've got goal-oriented governance. That's about having a clear strategy right from the top. Then there's holistic protection, which is all about building your defenses from the inside out. Third is cross-domain joint defense, recognizing you're not alone, you're part of a huge ecosystem. And finally, robust resilience, which is all about making sure you can get back up after you take a hit. All right, let's dive into those first two pillars, because this is all about getting your own house in order. We're talking about setting up a clear chain of command and building a fortress that's fundamentally secure from its very core. So the first pillar, governance, really comes down to one word: accountability. Security is no longer just some problem for the IT department. It's a board-level responsibility. This means you have to empower a Chief Information Security Officer, a CISO, giving them a direct line to the top, and, this is crucial, giving them the responsibility, the authority, and the resources to actually get the job done. But look, strong leadership is only half the picture. A great general needs a well-designed fortress. And that brings us right to our second pillar, holistic protection. This is all about the architecture of your defense. A really core idea here is something called security shift left. It's a simple concept, but it's incredibly powerful. Imagine you're building a skyscraper, but you only start thinking about where to put the fire escapes after the building is completely finished. I mean, that would be a chaotic, expensive mess, right? Well, shift left means designing your security, your digital fire escapes, into the software blueprint from day one. And how do you make sure all your digital building materials are actually safe? That's where something called an SBOM, or a software bill of materials, comes in. Think of it like a nutrition label for your code. It lists every single component, every ingredient. So if a vulnerability is ever found in one of those ingredients, you instantly know every single piece of software that's at risk. Now, let's be honest. This is a huge operational challenge for big banks. But that transparency, it's a total game changer. The last piece of this internal protection puzzle is zero trust architecture. And the philosophy is simple: never trust, always verify. In our old castle, once you got past the main gate, you could pretty much wander wherever you wanted. In a zero trust fortress, nope. There are checkpoints and guards at every single door inside the castle. Nobody gets automatic trust, ever. So how does this actually work? Well, think of it as a constant interrogation for every single action. Before you're granted access to anything, the system is asking, who are you exactly? That's identity. What are you using? That's your device. Where are you connecting from? That's the network. What are you trying to use? That's the application. And what specific information do you need? That's the data. You only get through the door if you get a yes to all 5 questions. Okay, So our internal fortress is now a whole lot stronger. But hey, no castle's an island, right? It's part of a bigger kingdom with allies, trade routes, suppliers, you name it. The next two pillars are all about extending our defense to that entire ecosystem. This is exactly what cross-domain joint defense means. You have to accept that your security is only as strong as your weakest partner. So that means you're ranking your vendors by risk, you're demanding transparency from them with things like SBOMs, you're running joint security drills, and you're actively sharing threat intel with the community through groups like FISAC. In this new world, cybersecurity is a team sport. So we've built a strong fortress, and we've secured the kingdom. But what happens when an attack actually gets through? Because let's be real, eventually one will. Even the best defenses have to be prepared for the worst-case scenario. And that brings us to the fourth and final pillar, which is really the ultimate goal of this entire blueprint: resilience. This isn't just about preventing attacks. It's about making sure that when you do get hit, your most critical services can survive and bounce back fast. But bouncing back fast is a little vague. To make it a real goal, you have to be able to measure it. So when you're under attack, how do you actually define what a successful recovery looks like? What are the metrics that matter? Well, success really boils down to two key numbers. First, on the left, you have RTO, the recovery time objective. That's all about time. How fast do we have to be back online? Are we talking minutes or hours? Then on the right, you have RPO, the recovery point objective. This one is all about data. How much information can we afford to lose? An hour's worth? A whole day's worth? Those two goals, time and data, define your entire recovery strategy. And this is absolutely crucial. These are not just theoretical goals. You don't know if you can actually meet your RTO and RPO until you test them, for real. This blueprint demands constant, intense drills that simulate real-world disasters, everything from a massive ransomware attack to one of your key tech suppliers just vanishing overnight. So, let's just pull it all together. Governance sets the strategy and the chain of command. Protection builds that strong internal foundation. Joint defense extends that security out to the entire ecosystem. And resilience makes sure you can survive anything. You see how each pillar supports the others? It creates a truly living, breathing defense system. When it comes down to it, the most important thing to take away from all this is that this blueprint isn't about a one-time project. It's not about just buying some new piece of software. It's about creating a fundamental shift in culture. A living, evolving security culture that is always learning, always adapting, and always getting stronger. Building the smart fortress is a massive leap forward, there's no doubt about it. But the attackers are always adapting, always getting smarter too. So that leaves us with one final big question. As our defenses evolve, what new kinds of threats are being dreamed up right now to tear them down? What's the next move in this endless chess game?